Alright, look at me. You should be really proud of me, not just for uploading a video 3 weeks in a row, but also for finally being done with Riku stuff and art book stuff, which means I'm free to talk about Xeno games that came out before 2022. Granted, we are also going to be talking about a Xeno game that came out in 2022 in this video, and it's DLC that released into 2023, but Xenoblade 2 is also there, so we'll take the small victories as they come. As always, if you'd like more from me, there's a like button, there's a comment button, there's a subscribe button, and if you'd like to see my videos an entire week early before they go public, which means you could see the one after this right now, there are Patreon and YouTube member buttons that you can also click to support me directly. With that being said, we can move on to the actual video. Except, I don't get to say something that's become my catchphrase recently because this video will only contain spoilers for Xenoblade 2, Xenoblade 3, and their respective DLCs, and will not cover story content beyond what's shown off in trailers for them. There will be more gameplay spoilers that extend beyond that, but I don't need to talk about plot here, because another big Luxon first! This video isn't even about lore, and it's barely about gameplay. We have entered the realm of some weird third thing, and really the only way I could properly describe this is, I guess it's a retrospect spiritual successor to all my patch reviews which I made for both of these games, and kinda the capstone on that. If Xenoblade 3 is the culmination of the series up until now, this can be the culmination of my update videos on the series up until now, and when Xenoblade 4 1.0.1 releases, we can start a new story arc for me as well. Before we start the proper comparison, I think I need to point out that this is only about the paid DLC for these two games. Both DLC passes of which I absolutely consider worth your money. Despite their short length, Torna and Future Redeemed are both considered some of the best entries in the entire Xeno series purely on a quality content to playtime ratio, and I can't really think of a world in which either of them is not worth the $30 MSRP of the expansion pass for each game on its own. Basically, I'm not going to be taking any free updates into account for these comparisons, nor will I be factoring in the quality or amount of content in either expansion campaign. In effect, I am only reviewing each expansion pass up until the update before the final one, which includes the actual expansion storyline. I know the new story campaign is the main draw for most people buying the DLC pass, but you're still paying for all of the other content when you buy that, so I think it is worth reviewing both passes on the merits of that content as well. That being said, this wouldn't be a me video if it were short, so I am going to talk about the free post-launch content as well. I think it's fairly evident now, 6.5 years later, that Xenoblade 2 was barely finished when it first released, so you're gonna see more free updates to 2, largely containing things that were supposed to be in the game on release, but it was rushed. And since the release date was probably set in stone by Nintendo, and Monolith Soft hadn't been doing crunch for over a decade by then, they released what they had, and instead of delaying the full release of the game or crunching to include stuff, would then include things that were obviously intended to be in the game from the beginning in post-launch updates. Both games had a day one patch that primarily included the ability to receive expansion pass items, which makes sense as there was technically day one DLC for both games, which was simply a bunch of free items to help you on your playthrough and nothing really substantial, as they were probably still working on the actual DLC content. You have to remember, when I'm talking about all of this, it takes weeks, if not months, for a game patch to be approved. Even longer before release date when a game goes gold, especially if it needs to be physically printed out on a cartridge or disc, and it's impossible to fix every single bug or issue that you find before the deadline, which is why day one patches that fix bugs are not a bad thing. They primarily consist of things the developers knew about that they couldn't have in time to get it put on the physical media, but still were able to fix before the actual release date. That being said, here is where Xenoblade 2's pseudo-unfinished state immediately rears its head, as it includes 2 additional menu options. The first one is the event theater, and the second one is the Japanese voice track, both of which were included on cartridge with the physical versions of Torna Definitive Edition and 3, suggesting that those were not intentionally left out. Another kind of funny thing about the day one update, Xenoblade 2's was legitimately day one. Xenoblade 3's was day -3 for some reason. I'm gonna be real, I hope that didn't affect anyone. That patch released the same day the review embargo lifted. So if you had an early copy and were actively still playing it to make your review when that patch released, I really hope that not only were you compensated for your work, but that patch found you having already completed your review and simply playing the rest of the game on your own time, or you never had a strict deadline of embargo day in the first place. After release, the only new free content Xenoblade 3 received was 2 updates, both of which releasing after the DLC concluded, adding support for first the Pyra and Mithra and then later the Noah and Mio amiibos. These do count as free content drops, as while you can purchase amiibo and pay to win to just scan them and unlock stuff for free, an NPC has been added that will also unlock the items for you if you've completed certain criteria within the game, so these are earnable without spending any additional money. Granted, all of the Noah and Mio outfits already existed for the purpose of cutscenes and menus, so they're really just unlocking things that were technically already in the game, just not available to players. But really, the only big problem I have with this is that it took like a year and a half after the game released for these to be added. All 8 of those outfits are the kind of thing that a lot of the classic JRPGs the Xenoblade series is inspired by would include as some sort of bonus you can unlock in-game, but from either beating a difficult super boss or completing some big grindy endgame challenge. And hey, guess what? There are 2 sets of items, one from Noah and one from Mio, one of which requires beating a strong super boss and the other of which requires a big grind that's best completed at endgame. So really, my only problem is the big time delay on this stuff. As for Xenoblade 2, on the other hand, basically every update with this game included some substantial quality of life improvement. They're all good, and I'm sure the rushed release prevented some of them from being added in the base game, or from them having the ability to gain feedback from testers that would make them think of some of this stuff before receiving feedback from the general public, but I'm not going to talk about them. What I am going to talk about are new core features. For example, in patch 1.3.0, which released 3 months to the day after the game came out, New Game Plus was added, as well as an optional easy difficulty. Granted, Xenoblade 2 is the first game in the series to include an easy difficulty, but Xenoblade Definitive Edition and Xenoblade 3 after it came with a difficulty slider day 1, so I do think it's pretty obvious that like New Game Plus, this was intended to be in the game from the beginning. In 2's very big favor though, its New Game Plus is significantly better than Xenoblade 3's. 3's is literally just a New Game Plus doing the exact bare minimum for that kind of thing that Chrono Trigger did when it invented the concept in 1995, except without even the option to go for a different ending. 2's New Game Plus includes a new upgrade tree for every party member that includes a special ultimate mode for one of them, an ultimate move for one of your blades that couldn't use it in the base game for story reasons, the ability to disengage story blades from all of your party members, meaning you can now also send those blades on merc missions, the ability to decrease as well as increase your party members' levels, and then spend the bonus experience you got from either doing quests or decreasing level on various items, including items that will add an additional accessory slot to all of your party members, and the ability to recruit 7 characters who are antagonists in the story as rare blades. The only one of those features that Xenoblade 3 includes is the ability to level down. But in 3's case, it's not even a New Game Plus exclusive, you can do that in your regular file as long as you've beaten the final boss with it. In a point against both games, this level down option should have been in regular New Game straight from the start. Selling bonus experience in 2 should definitely have stayed a post-game or New Game Plus additional feature, but everyone loved when Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition let you level down from the start, despite that game being the only one in the series that heavily punishes you for being underleveled, and then they just didn't include that as an option in the next game 2 years later for some reason. While Xenoblade 3 does not have any New Game Plus content, it does have some post-game content, as 2 additional heroes, that game's equivalent to rare blades, are available only after clearing the main story, which provides 2 new classes to the party members. This is one case where Xenoblade 3 100% has 2 beat, as in the patch after New Game Plus was added, 1 new rare blade, Telos, who can only be obtained after clearing the main story, was added to the game alongside some DLC additions, and she does not have a new weapon type, so effectively she does not provide a new class to the party. Thus, while Xenoblade 2 has 35 rare blades, not counting any of the required story ones, prior to the DLC releasing, though admittedly 7 of those are New Game Plus exclusive and 1 of them is post-game exclusive, it only has 23 weapon types. Xenoblade 3 has 19 heroes, including the 2 post-game ones pre-DLC. But when you include the 6 party members, you have 25 classes. Additionally, while Xenoblade 2 has 23 weapon types, a lot of them cannot be used by every single character. 3 of them are exclusive to Torna, and Torna cannot use any weapon types other than those 3. And on top of that, another 5 have restrictions based around party members. And while all 7 New Game Plus exclusive blades are new weapon types, only 1 party member can equip each blade at once, so you can't double up on them, which means there are only 8 weapon types in the game that all 4 of your non-Torna party members can use, and that you can have multiple party members use at once. Compare that to Xenoblade 3, where once you have everything unlocked on everyone, you can make your party any combination of the 25 classes in the game, and include a hero for an additional representative of one of the 19 classes that doesn't belong to a party member. While different rare blades have different abilities, meaning they're better for certain party members or provide a different take on that weapon type, 3 does have so much more customization, even if it looks like 2 has more class-related content on the surface because of the pure amount of characters. While yes, there are less characters you can have join your party in 3 compared to 2, basically every piece of dialogue in the 2 quests each hero gives you is voiced compared to barely anything in the Blade side quests being voiced. So I think that does even out in terms of total voice lines. One additional criticism of Xenoblade 2's that you could make that I don't really think is valid is pointing out that all of the new weapon types added across both New Game Plus and the DLC are clones of existing weapon types. This is true, but really only from an auto attack animation perspective. In addition to all of these blades having skills that blades with the source weapon type that their weapon was cloned from don't have, therefore making them play differently, they also have a different set of arts on each character compared to the source weapon type, which, while yes, you do have to level those up separately, allow for a different play style that character might not have initially had access to. While yes, a lot of arts a character has on a cloned weapon type are similar to the arts that same character would have on the source weapon type, most of the clone weapons are also in a different role than the source weapons, so you could have the same utility in terms of arts, while also building your character stat-wise in a different way too, allowing for more customization. The only real downside to any of this is that, again, you are locked to only 1 party member at a time having access to these classes. At this point, I'm thinking that perhaps I shouldn't have said the free update stuff was going to be a small section, because we are now free to start talking about the DLC. Xenoblade 3 had less total DLC drops than 2 did, so what I'm going to do now is look at all 4 drops 3 had, and then talk about comparable drops that 2 did to those. As Volume 4 is simply Future Redeemed releasing, I'm only going to talk about the first 3. 3's first drop is called the Adventure Support Pack. It includes 30 silver Napon coins, 10 gold Napon coins, 6 accessories that are extremely good in the early game and still useful later on, as well as 1 thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later. 2 has 5 item distributions, and many of them include more individual types of item than 3's singular one does. Now, obviously, these are all items that can be earned in-game without having to buy the DLC, so there's no real reason to use any of this, and I tend not to early on in playthroughs of either game in the first place because it just makes you overpowered early on. But there's really a good reason 2 gives you more. While 3 can be very grindy, it ultimately only has Napon coins of both varieties and enemy drops as consumables, while 2 has core crystals, which are necessary to unlock most of the rare blades I've been talking about, ether cylinders, pouch items, ether crystals for Poppy's upgrades that can otherwise only come from grinding a minigame or selling bonus experience in New Game Plus, and overdrive protocol for moving rare blades from one character to another, which, with the DLC and New Game Plus blades, is sometimes necessary in order to give a weapon type to another character without releasing the blade and pulling them again. So I'd say it's relatively more justified for 2 to give you a bunch of random items 5 different times than it is for 3. It's less necessary in 3, though I would have definitely appreciated a bunch of Napon coins with every DLC wave drop instead of just the first one. Throughout 2's item distributions, you get 50,000 G, 60,000 Poppy Ether Crystals, 1 piece of gear that, like the 6 pieces you get in Xenoblade 3, is available through other means, 10 Overdrive Protocols, and a bunch of core crystals of varying rarities. You do also get a bunch of pouch items, but with the exception of 3 Cream Orange Parathas that are just generically good in the early game from the first item distribution, all of the rest of them are just to avoid grinding for trust on your blades. You get 5 copies each of Pyra and Nia's favorite pouch items, 3 each of Tora and Poppy Alpha's favorite pouch items, and then in the last distribution, 10 Love Sources, which are a very powerful trust-increasing pouch item that you could also craft through a side quest in other parts of the DLC. So, the vast majority of stuff you get in Xenoblade 2 is to mitigate grinding or for modes of gameplay that just don't exist in 3, so there's no real reason for players of 3 to be given an equivalent for it. 2 needs players to have more stuff handed out to them than 3 does, and ultimately you don't need any of this stuff in the first place, so there's not really a lot to complain about 3 getting a lot less. The way I like to put it is that Xenoblade 3 takes a lot less time to 100% than Xenoblade 2, but it has an equal or greater amount of meaningful content when compared to 2, because a lot of 2's stuff is just grinding core crystals, grinding affinity, or grinding merc missions. So in addition to having more systems you can give out an item to decrease the grinding for, it also just has more stuff in it that would make you think you are grinding and potentially be a pain point for players, so there's a good reason to give out more stuff to mitigate that. Xenoblade 3 gives an additional thing. That is, of course, the first set of alternate costumes for the game's main cast. Instead of talking about each set of alternate costumes on an update-by-update basis, I'm going to talk about all of 3's alternate costumes at once. This first set that came with the first wave of DLC is simply a recolor of every character's outfit in their default class. With Wave 2 of DLC, each of the 6 characters gets a swimsuit as well as a recolor of that. Each character gets another new outfit that's a reference to a character from either Xenoblade 1 or 2, and an alternate color of that. This is a total of 5 alternate costumes for all 6 of the main characters, with 2 brand new models made for each of them. Throughout Xenoblade 2, there are 12 characters that get alternate costumes, but in addition to it being in a different formula than Xenoblade 3 has, there's also an uneven distribution. 7 of these 12 characters simply have 2 recolors of their default outfit, some of which are references to past Xeno games, and 1 swimsuit. Included in these 7 characters is Mythra, who has an additional free costume based on her appearance in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate that's available in both the main game and Torna the Golden Country. Tora has 2 recolors in a swimsuit, but his recolors both technically include new assets, as one of them changes his mohawk, and the other swaps out the wrench in his tool belt for some kind of steering wheel with a skull on it. Dromark only has 2 recolors and no swimsuit. Pyra has 2 recolors and a swimsuit, as well as a 4th costume that's simply an outfit she wears during a small portion of the story, though this can only be reobtained via DLC, unlike the amiibo rewards in Xenoblade 3. Poppy gets 3 recolors and 1 swimsuit across her various forms, and 1 spoiler character has 3 recolors and no swimsuit. All of this taken into account, Xenoblade 3 has 12 new models and 18 recolors for a total of 30 new costumes across 6 characters, while Xenoblade 2 has 28 recolors, 10 new models, and 1 story outfit for a total of 39 alternate costumes across 12 characters. So while I would have liked some of the heroes to have alternate outfits as well, especially the ones you're required to get throughout the main story, or at the very least Riku and Manana, the 7th and 8th main characters, it's clear that Xenoblade 3 does give you more per character than 2 does, and the only reason 2 has more costumes overall is because its main cast is larger. Additionally, 2 has 9 more costumes than 3 does. It also has way more than 9 recolors more than 3 does, and less new models in total despite the larger amount of characters, and a smaller percentage of its costumes are new models. So with the exception of the very big deal that some of 2's recolors are references to Xenogears and not just a previous Xenoblade game, 3 ultimately wins out in terms of DLC costumes. As for something that 2 definitely wins out over 3 in, 3 just doesn't have DLC quests at all, while 2 has 4 waves of 5 each for a total of 20. Most of these don't really have any significant rewards beyond, again, some good gear, more stuff that will decrease grinding time a bit, and maybe additional trust compared to what a normal quest would give. And a lot of them, as far as actual writing goes, are just additional normal quests, but a select few involve crossovers between rare blades that just don't interact at all in the base game. And this is something that's kind of really missing in 3. 3 has heroes just like 2 has rare blades, but there are significantly less of them, and you can only ever have one on the field at once, so they very rarely interact. 2 has a lot of dialogue that's just between rare blades you're never required to get, in addition to all of the party members having interactions with them too. And 3, there are very few side quests in which heroes interact at all. Well, yes, there are quests that bring various colonies together and include heroes like that, and sometimes heroes even cross over into each other's ascension quests. There just isn't a lot of interaction between optional party members in 3 compared to 2, before you include these side quests. And then these side quests give interaction between rare blades that don't have battle dialogue or the like together. So that's just more flavor and building these cool characters, which is partially the reason why I think 2's rare blades are more iconic than 3's heroes overall, despite the fact that there are more of them, which means it would be easy to dilute that iconicness with a lot of boring ones. Yeah, a lot of the side quests are basically nothing, but also the ones that are unique blade interactions exacerbate a problem that base 2 to base 3 already had, and 3 doesn't rectify at all in its DLC. We can now move on to Xenoblade 3 DLC Wave 2. This and Wave 3 follow the exact same formula. They include one new hero who can just be obtained by completing a hero quest out in the open world after getting to the necessary area to unlock that quest, and one half of the challenge battle mode. We are going to talk about the new heroes specifically and then move on to challenge battle. Wave 2 brings Ino and the new Naponic champion Agnian tank class, and Wave 3 brings Masha and the new Kavesi healer Lapidarist class. Both of these fill up holes in the base game's roster, not only adding new support classes, but also giving support classes to Kavesi and Agnian arts that were lacking before, and each of these heroes has a unique gimmick. Ino has Ino Swap, a reference to Poppy Swap from Xenoblade 2, that's basically an extra upgrade tree that allows you to boost her capabilities. Unfortunately, this only boosts her as a hero when she's added to the party, and not any character that has been swapped into the Naponic champion class, but it is still more content than a normal hero would have. Masha, instead, comes with a unique accessory crafting system that when enough time and effort is put into, can actually give you better stuff than you can get anywhere else in the game. Unfortunately, most of the effects on these accessories are just strictly better versions of ones that already exist in the base game, and for the most part, they only exist to patch up skill issues, as all of the content, including the first half of Challenge Battle mode, that released before Masha did, is easily clearable without this stuff, and it's not really super necessary to get through the second half of Challenge Battle mode. So while it is a new feature, it's not very necessary to fully enjoy all of the other content in the game, including the new hard DLC stuff that was added in the same patch as Masha. I do hope something like this returns in a later game, but the way it was implemented isn't even necessarily bad here, it's just the challenge of the rest of the game isn't scaled so that you really need to make much use of this feature in order to get through it. Both of these heroes have a regular hero quest to first unlock them, as well as an ascension quest that happens later on in the story to upgrade both them and their class's level cap to 20. And lastly, both their characters as they exist, and the content of their side quests, do provide a bit of fan service for Xenoblade 2 specifically. Speaking of Xenoblade 2, as opposed to 3 giving you 2 heroes, 2 gives you 3 blades. Funnily enough, the first blade, just like Ino, is a robot and a tank and associated with Napon. This, of course, is Poppy Buster, who also has the unique distinction of being the most accessible light element blade in the entire game. There are only 6 blades that can have the light element in the entire game, as common blades cannot have it. The first is Mithra, who is locked to Rex and locked behind the story. The second is Cosmos, who any driver can use, but she's the hardest rare blade to pull in the entire game. The third is Poppy Buster, who is a generic weapon type and can be reassigned to any of the 4 driver party members as you see fit. The fourth and fifth we'll talk about later in the video, and the sixth is an option for one form of regular Poppy that's locked behind a whole lot of grinding. The downside is, of course, that Shield Hammer is the worst weapon type in the game, and Poppy Buster is a regular Shield Hammer, not a buffed clone, so make of that what you will. Poppy Buster's quest involves an expansion of Torra's story and character arc, and as Poppy Buster is simply a robot and artificial blade designed to be linked to a normal driver, it can be reassigned to any driver at will after being unlocked and does not require a core crystal. The other 2 DLC blades, you simply get a core crystal in your inventory that you can then use to awaken that blade on whichever driver you choose, and then would need an overdrive protocol in order to reassign them to a different driver. The second blade is Crossette, a fire element bitball and one of the best healers in the game. Her side quest is an expansion on Pyra's character arc, and she comes with a unique field skill for food crafting similar to Pyra, though she can make different items. The third of these blades is Corfin, another light element, and also the only one to have a new weapon type, being the Uchigatana. It's probably the least interesting clone weapon though, as it is very similar to the base Chroma Katana, and the arts it gives characters are virtually identical to the Chroma Katana ones, with 2 key differences. One is that it has a few different positional arts, and the other is that every character gets a smash art with it. Now, one character already gets smashed with Chroma Katana, but smash is still the rarest part of the blade combo, and this basically allows you to give whichever character you want an additional access to smash regardless of what other rare blades you pulled on them, as well as a powerful light element blade. So he's good and useful, but in terms of brand new weapon classes, probably the most boring. His side quest primarily revolves around Rex's character. I honestly can't think of a good way to compare the DLC heroes with the DLC blades in this case, as they serve different purposes, and ultimately, each hero contains more unique content compared to each blade, just in terms of getting them up to speed with the rest of your characters. We can't quite move on to Challenge Battle mode, because Xenoblade 2 has an additional feature that 3 does not. 2, in the same update that gives you access to Poppy Buster, also includes new difficulty levels. While Easy mode was added for free, Hard mode, called Bringer of Chaos in 2, is only exclusive to the DLC, meaning you have to pay for a harder version of the game. And on top of that, there is a custom difficulty option that allows you to tweak the difficulty of a ton of settings as you see fit, allowing you to go easier than easy, harder than Bringer of Chaos, or to make it difficult but fun in whatever way you so choose. Now, Xenoblade 3, like a normal video game, launched with easy and hard by default, but despite data miners finding data that would point to custom difficulty being in the game at some point, it was never added as part of the DLC, so this is a major feature that Xenoblade 3 completely lacks, but 2 has. Now though, and for basically the rest of this video, we talk about Challenge Battle mode, and at least as far as the first wave of each is concerned, Xenoblade 2 once again blows 3 out of the water. Both 2's Challenge Battle and the Time Attack mode of 3's Challenge Battle involve taking a pre-made party and going into battles against different waves of enemies with various restrictions or themes. 2's version started with 24 fights, while 3's started with 18, and a lot more of 2's have a unique gimmick, including but not limited to fighting through a gauntlet of Napon from throughout the series at that point as Torra, playing through a cutscene, the only time you're able to control Jin, keeping an Aspar alive long enough for it to shed its skin and level up a ton, and fighting super bosses at such ridiculously high levels that even Xenoblade 3's built-in feature to rematch them from their tombstone at a higher level can't achieve. 3's fights are more in line with the 10 challenge battles added to Xenoblade 1 in its definitive edition, as both are called time attack, where the only way to improve your score is to clear the fight faster, as opposed to Xenoblade 2's version, where you can get more score by doing basically stylish things, defeating more enemies or completing blade combos. While some of the combinations of characters you fight are interesting and make for engaging fights, 3's time attack really only has one mission that's particularly a standout in terms of being unique, and that is the one based around the Soul Hacker class. Both games include leaderboards for high scores on every difficulty, and you can even take on a fight in a difficulty different than the one your game is set to directly from the challenge menu without having to change it in the game settings. But again, as 2 has custom difficulty and 3 does not, that just makes its iteration even bigger and more replayable. To make things worse, you can get an additional 2 rare blades from 2's challenge battle, and they're guest characters, Shulk and Fiora from Xenoblade 1. You only get them when you enter the Land of Challenge for the first time, and in order to bring them out into Allrest, you need to clear certain challenges, with their affinity charts being upgraded by clearing various parts of Challenge Battle Mode, among other things. And they're both new classes. Shulk is the last light element blade, using the Monado, which is a clone of the Shield Hammer turned into an attacker and sped up a lot, making it significantly better. Fiora is busted, she is the best healer in the game, using her twin knives from Xenoblade 1 as a wind element healer who just does more DPS than most DPSs despite being classed as a healer. To make things worse, in a later update, 2 additional fights were added. Technically, this is 3 more fights, but one effectively upgrades into a more complete version of the same fight after you clear it once, and this is the fight that gives you access to Elma from Xenoblade X as a 3rd challenge battle blade, bringing the total of DLC blades in Xenoblade 2 up to 6 as compared to the 2 new classes you get throughout the entirety of Xenoblade 3's DLC pass. The last of these fights is also heavily based around the swimsuit items, and this is where the rewards for both challenge battles come in. Both games give you access to accessories, items that speed up grinding, and just generally stuff to make you better in the main game and within challenge mode itself. They also give you access to the alternate costumes. All of Xenoblade 2's costumes, besides the Smash Bros. Mythra one, come from Challenge Battle mode, and the Challenge Battle mode of Xenoblade 3 gives you access to specifically the swimsuits and their recolors. Elma is a dark attacker blade using her dual swords from Xenoblade X. Unlike the other 3 DLC blades, the guest characters don't have specific blade quests, and only have introductory cutscenes and battle dialogue as far as voice acting goes. But if you have Elma, Shulk, and Cosmos all sufficiently leveled and have enough story progress, you can unlock a massively fan-servicey and slightly lore implication heavy conversation between those 3 and Rex, making for the biggest meeting of Xeno protagonists we've ever seen. Don't get me wrong, you obviously can't criticize Xenoblade 3's expansion pass when it comes to fan service when Future Redeemed exists, but more so the quantity of new characters you actually get with the DLC in the base game. Now, I was slightly untruthful, as there is a 19th fight in Xenoblade 3, and there are technically 2 more heroes. Clearing Future Redeemed gives you the 2 Saviors, which is a fight against Shulk and Rex using their grown-up designs from that expansion. And once you beat it, you can gain them as heroes in the base game. They're only heroes. They do not have any unique dialogue with the party members, and they do not give their classes to the party members. They're basically just there for show. So, yeah, Xenoblade 2's Challenge Battle mode is significantly better than 3's on all accounts. However, we have only talked about Masha from Xenoblade 3's DLC Wave 3. Because remember how I said that Time Attack is only one half of Challenge Battle mode in 3? Well, the other half is Archsage's Gauntlet, a roguelike mode about picking one party member, going through stages and stages of different enemies, and collecting heroes and various randomized upgrades as you go to make the best team you possibly can. Were you looking for replayability? Were you looking for additional difficulty? this is where you'll find it. It exists, it's just not in Time Attack. This mode also grants you an entirely separate set of rewards to Time Attack, including the additional throwback costumes. So, Xenoblade 2's costumes, they all came from the same place. There are 3 different sets of costumes in 3, and you get them through different things. And there are also amiibo costumes that you can get just through the base game. I know a lot of high-end players who were very disappointed about 3's Time Attack, only to have their opinion of the challenge mode completely turn around just by the existence of Archsage's Gauntlet. And ultimately, now that we find ourselves near the end of the video, I think what I expected to be saying at the end of this is not what I'm actually going to be saying. I was expecting to be like, yeah, when you ignore the items and the actual expansion story, 2 gives you so much more in its DLC pass than 3 does, but the more I think about it, the more even they really are, all things considered. I'm not going to give a definitive answer as to which is better, especially because, well, we're ignoring Torna and Future Redeemed, and those are massive parts of both of those passes, but I'd say it's a lot closer than I ever expected it to be when I first thought of making this video. So, I learned a bit with this, and I hope you did as well. Until next week, this is Luxon, signing off.